Hey, what's going on, you guys? It's ASI. Today I'm bringing you guys some more off videos. We're taking a break for a couple days from our Roman series, and I know Caesar's about to launch into civil war. I know he's going to go all Caesar, all everything you learned in middle school type of thing. But before we get into that, there's a couple videos I want to watch. We're going to take a break, and we're going to watch one by Knowledgia. Knowledge with an IA, basically. There is the channel. The link is down in the description. I was recommended this by James J., one of my viewers, and it is going to be titled The British American War of 1812, Explained in 13 Minutes. Just a real short summary. Before we hop into this, if you guys want to hit that sub button, help me out. I really do appreciate it. And before we hop in, I just want to take 30 seconds and explain what I know about the War of 1812. Obviously, I know it happened in 1812. I know it was between America and Great Britain, the United Kingdom. I know that they burned down the White House at the time, and I'm pretty sure that they were winning, but the reason that they left was because a hurricane rolled in. I might be wrong on that one. I mean, a lot of Americans go, yeah, we kicked the British ass in 1812. And it's like, well, yeah. From what I know about it, I think we were actually losing. Maybe I'm wrong. But, yeah, I don't know. Let's sit back. Let's watch it. All right.
In 1812, the young nation of the United States took on the country with the most powerful navy in the world in a war that would affect more than just the former colonies and their colonizer.
To be fair, though, they may have the strongest navy in the world, but I mean, what are they going to do? They could hit like all of this, and I guess they could cut off trade routes. But I mean, we have so much land at this point that we've gotten to the point where we could start growing inland. Like growing crops and food for ourselves really well. So we don't necessarily need that much from the other countries probably anymore.
United States of America first gained freedom from the British in an 8-year-long Revolutionary War that finally came to a close when Britain inevitably recognized the independence of their 13 former colonies on September 3rd, 1783.
And I'd like to thank the French for that, coming over, getting us started, getting us a manual, and getting our soldiers in ship shape.
The most relevant impacts of this war that would fuel future tensions between the US and Britain once again was the role of the Native Americans. And as a fan of our channel, you should check out our friends over at Curiosity Stream. This is my personal
Everybody
favorite
does this
streaming
to me.
service, a place where I
hate when they do Curiosity Stream. There we are.
Britain remained a driving force of the discord since not only had the natives taken its side in the revolution, but the British also openly encouraged the Native Americans to fight back against their antagonists. By 1820,
I guess my question is, if the British won and took back the space, do you think they'd turn around and say, oh, no, it's cool, Native Americans, you guys can keep your land, or do you think they just steamroll them also?
This, combined with a few other factors, led to the development of a new war. While the United States was clearly unhappy with the united opposition from Britain and the natives, they were also infuriated by allegations that the Royal Navy was utilizing a tactic known as impressment to take US men for their own troops. On top of this, the ongoing strife between Britain and France had a notable impact on the United States. Heavily locked in their own struggle, the warring nations tried to restrict trade from neutral countries and punish anyone who attempted to ignore the constraints. This put the United States in a detrimental position due to their inability to continue trade with either nation unless they wanted to risk invoking the wrath of the other side. While France took a more laid-back approach to ensure the US abstained from doing business with the British, the latter was more aggressive about the matter. On January 7th, 1807, Britain issued an order in council stating, "It is hereby ordered that no vessel shall be permitted to trade from one port to another, both which ports shall belong to or be in the possession of France or her allies, or shall be so far under their control as the British vessels may not freely trade." Furthermore, any ships that refused to obey these restrictions would be subject to seizure by the Royal Navy, cargo and all.
So basically, you trade with France, and we're going to crack down on you because we're in a war with Napoleon.
In November, the original order was expanded, now to include all the ports and places of France and her allies, or of any other country at war with His Majesty, and all other ports or places in Europe, from which, although not at war with His Majesty, the British flag is excluded, and all ports or places in the colonies belonging to His Majesty's enemies.
Oh,
In
wow.
retaliation, France, under the command of Napoleon Bonaparte, issued the Milan Decree, which said that every ship, to whatever nation it may belong, that shall have submitted to be searched by an English ship or to a voyage to England, or shall have paid any tax whatsoever to the English government, is thereby, and for that alone, declared to be denationalized, to have forfeited the protection of its king, and to have become English property. Adding,
Yeah, I mean, we saw how that worked when he tried to cut off trade from Great Britain and everything. It didn't work that well.
on, Napoleon declared that any of the aforementioned ships that enter French ports or those of French allies are good and lawful prizes of his nation. Forced to reply, U.S. President Thomas Jefferson signed the Embargo Act in December of 1807, blocking all international trade from American ports and taking direct aim at Britain. Unfortunately for America, the act backfired and turned the U.S. into more of a victim than anyone else. Emphasizing this point, the Minister to France himself even said, "Here it is not felt, and in England it is forgotten." The effects of the Embargo Act ultimately pushed the U.S. into an economic depression, and it had to be repealed less than 2 years after the initial signature. In its place, the Non-Intercourse Act was passed, which directly forbade trade with Britain and France and their colonies. When this new act still proved to be ineffective, the United States tried once again, this time passing Macon's Bill No. 2 in May of 1810.
Is that just a crude drawing of our flag at the time, or is that actually somewhat what our flag looked like? I know that we had many different flags, as we added stars, added all kind of stuff. And I know, I'm pretty sure. So we had the original 13 stripes, and I'm pretty sure we kept on expanding stripes. I think till we got to 15 or something like that, maybe 17. And then we said, hey, that's too many stripes, and we went back to just 13, just started adding stars. But is that actually what our flag looked like at the time? Was that 1, 2? So let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15. 15 stripes, 15 stars. That might have been a natural flag at the time. Very cool.
This bill lifted trading bans and stated that if either France or Britain removed their own restrictions, the US would re-establish an embargo with the opposing nation. By August, Napoleon enacted a plan to exacerbate tension between Britain and the United States, and it ultimately worked. He first told the new president, James Madison, that he intended to exempt the US from his previously established Berlin and Milan decrees, promoting Madison to bring back the Non-Intercourse Act constraints against Britain in November of that year, despite the fact that Napoleon never actually followed through on his proclamation. Britain and the United States were now on the brink of all-out war. The final straw came when the Battle of Tippecanoe unfolded in late 1811, as the U.S. troops claimed victory over the Native Americans, wishing to stop further expansion once again. Given the United States was fairly confident in the belief that the British were supplying the natives with weapons from Canada, a faction of the U.S. Republican Party known as the Warhawks began a heavy push towards an official declaration of war. At last, on June 18, 1812, President James Madison signed the declaration against Britain, despite contention about the issue coming from both the House and Senate. Another problem emerged as well when Britain decided to suddenly repeal their trade restrictions before news of the U.S. declaration of war actually reached the British over a month later. Aware of this delay, Britain decided not to immediately respond to the call of war and waited to see how the Americans would react to their repeals. When the US got wind of this surprising development, they were, in turn, unsure of how the Brits would react to their declaration of war. Ultimately, the United States decided to follow through on its proclamation and did so by invading Canada, which was a British colony at the time. While the American troops hoped to capture Canadian land to force Britain into negotiation, they had no such success.
Yeah, I mean, their army probably wasn't that impressive. I'm sure it backfired.
No one was prepared for war. The British and French have been busy fighting their own battles, and the US military was grossly ill-suited to take on the likes of Britain. The defeats were plenty and humiliating for the Americans. One excessively humbling loss for the US happened when General William Hull surrendered Fort Detroit on August 16, 1812, and his own army to the British troops, and allowed Michigan territory to be deemed as part of Britain. Chased across the Canadian border, as Hull saw the size of his opponent's forces, which was a mix of British and Native American troops, and knowing that his daughter and grandchild were in the fort, he decided to give up without a single shot being fired. Hull's disgraceful failure led to an uptick in Native American raids in the Northwest and British conflict under the command of Major General Henry Proctor. Adding insult to injury, U.S. Brigadier General Henry Dearborn struggled to make any progress on the northeastern border because the militias in New England were not supportive of the war and uninterested in coming together for an attack on Montreal. By October, the Americans were finally able to get some momentum as Major General Stephen von Rensselaer led an army of 3,100 militiamen into the Battle of Queenston Heights. Rensselaer sent some advanced units across the river where they were able to hold their ground for some time on a slope just above Queenston and were successful until they were overcome by British forces as the rest of the American troops refused to join the fight. 925 U.S. soldiers were then captured by the British, despite Major General Isaac Brock on the British side being killed during the battle. Yet again, the Americans took another hit in 1813 when an attempt to retake Detroit resulted in a massacre of U.S. prisoners by their Native American opponents.
So basically, every time that we come at them, they just slap us down. Jesus.
Top of that, Brigadier General Henry Dearborn was replaced by Major General James Wilkins. At long last, though, in September of 1813, U.S. Commodore Oliver Hazard Perry scored a major naval victory at Lake Erie against the forces of British Captain Robert Barclay and opened the gates for more success on the American side. When the Battle of the Thames erupted the following month, the U.S. finally defeated the British and Native American Allied forces. The next spring season, at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend, a U.S. militia force faced off with a Native American force known as the Red Sticks and found victory once again, demanding that the losing side cede roughly 23 million acres of land, which would later become Alabama and span partially into Georgia. Another win for the United States followed in the summer, July of 1814, at the Battle of Chippewa, but it was short-lived, as the Battle of Lundy's Lane ended in a bloody stalemate shortly after, forcing the Americans to withdraw. The real deciding factor.
When do we... I thought at some point we withdrew all the way back to, Philadelphia. I believe... At this point was D.C. our capital. Philadelphia at one point was our capital. Maybe I'm crazy. Also, they're missing... missing A there? Philadelphia. Yeah. Anyway. But I thought that the White House was burned down at this point, and... I mean, they took D.C., I thought, but I'm not really sure. Maybe that's at the very, very end of the war.
Factor in the war came when Napoleon faced his first exile, allowing Britain to shift more focus to the discord with the United States. The British sliced through the U.S., destroying government buildings, including the White House, as they took control of Washington, D.C.
Okay, so the first White House was in D.C. I wasn't sure if... I know at some point wasn't our capital, or it was supposed to be in Philadelphia, something like that. Maybe I'm completely wrong, and I don't know what I'm talking about, but...
The Brits then tried to push farther into Baltimore by September under the authority of General Robert Ross, but were repulsed at the Battle of North Point, where General Ross was killed. In the battle that inspired the U.S. national anthem, more British troops were fought off at Fort McHenry. As these conflicts raged on,
Really? That's the battle that inspired the national anthem. Very cool. Very, very cool.
peace talks began in Ghent and eventually resulted in a signed treaty on December 24th, 1814. Still, just as with the declaration of war, the news was delayed and took until February 18th, 1815 to officially be ratified and end the war. The Treaty of Ghent reverted things back mostly to how they were before the combat, with a status quo antebellum. All territory was returned. Britain repealed their trade restrictions, stopped supporting the Native American revolts, and ended their impressment strategies.
I got a question. What about this whole section up here? All this. So I guess what we have where it comes up here, we come along here, but like it doesn't kick way up here, right? Isn't it more like right here, and that's kind of pretty much a straight line at that point? Or if it does kick up, at one point it turns into a straight line. I couldn't tell you exactly where in here, but somewhere in there. So I mean, these lines definitely shift some. I think we come down a little bit, and I think they go up. It kind of meets in the middle, but I guess that was later on in history. Also, they mentioned nothing about a hurricane or anything, and I really thought that was a part of the War of 1812. Perhaps I'm wrong. Have you guys heard anything about that?
In the end, the war was essentially a draw, and the only real losing side was the Native Americans, who had high hopes for British help in stopping U.S. expansion. Britain was able to claim victory against the French, and in a way, against the U.S. Meanwhile, the U.S. had the pride of more or less...
See, that's what I was just talking about. You talk to an American, hey, did we win or lose the War of 1812? Oh, man, we won that shit. Oh, man, we won. We beat the British, you know. We destroyed them. They ran away crying. Talk to the British, well, no, we won. We came in, we burned their White House. We smacked them down, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's interesting, you know. And again, I go back to that whole, I thought they were kicking our ass right up until a hurricane pulled in. Maybe I'm wrong again.
less winning their second war of independence.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but if you say so. Yeah, that was an interesting video. I really did like it. Oh, this would be a fun one. It's by the same channel. I'm going to add that to my list in the future. Sorry you guys can't see it right now, but I'm looking at my center screen, and a recommended video from that same channel is titled "How Did Germany Plan to Conquer Britain in World War II?" That'd be definitely be a fun one. I wonder what part they'd hit at, and just, you know. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Can't wait for tomorrow's video. It's actually going to be a really fun one. Till next time, this is Ace Asai. I love y'all, and I'm out.